There's a lot of epic shit to see in Rome, but I'm gonna tell you the secret thing that you probably didn't even know existed. But it's got one of the most epic stories of all time behind it, which I'm about to tell you.
'Cause it's what I do!
I tell stories and do experiments and stuff. Do subscribe. I'm actually in the car parking lot of my apartment building right now because my girlfriend was in Rio de Janeiro yesterday doing all kinds of crazy adventure shit. And it's like a 14-hour flight, so she's asleep in the apartment upstairs and I'm letting her do that. So first of all, Michelangelo's Moses is in a little chapel called Pietro di Bencoli, or as the Italians say, Basilica di Pietro di Bencoli. I don't know, something about St. Peter in chains. There's like these chains there, and the chains like reminded somebody of Peter who was chained up. That's not why you don't go there to see the chains. No one does. You go there to see Michelangelo's Moses. To fully understand why it is so epic, you need a little context. So let me kind of put it into focus for you. He chiseled it out of a single piece of marble in 1513. This needs something. The dates and times are important if I'm gonna prove my theory. I don't have my car keys, a pen, or a piece of paper, so we'll have to figure out some sort of B-roll animation. In the year 382, Saint Jerome translated the Bible from Hebrew into Latin. Saint was probably added later, I imagine. And that pretty much stayed the Bible until 1380, when John Wycliffe, an Oxford professor, translated it into English. So basically 1,000 years, this was the translation in Latin, and only the priests could read it because only they could really read. And in that 1,000 years, the Catholic Church kind of controlled everyone and everything by being like, look, the only way you're gonna get to heaven is by listening and doing what I say. Because that's what it says right here in this book, and only I can read this book. In the early 1500s, a little thing called the Reformation started happening. Coincidentally, that's when Michelangelo was chiseling the old Moses out of rock. The only other fact that's kind of important here is that at 1450, I think it says 80 or 50. Damn my penmanship. Gutenberg invented, I'm gonna say 50, just from memory, but it does look a lot like an 8. But basically the Bible was being translated into a lot of different languages. German, Greek, translations were abound. So Michelangelo. I prefer the Michelangelo to the Michelangelo because it's less hoity-toity. Pope Julius II comes to Michelangelo and says, I need something for my tomb. Would you make something beautiful and giant and extravagant and showing everyone how awesome I am? And this was the same pope that Michelangelo hated. So much so that the 16th century art historian Giorgio Vasari recorded like all their fights and all their interactions and how like Michelangelo ran away back to Florence, and I was like, no, come back and finish the Sistine Chapel. They just just back and forth with this shit. They really didn't like each other. And now Michelangelo has to make this guy who represents the head of the church, the whole establishment, the whole man, something epic. And Michelangelo, well, he's epicness personified. He did the first thing he ever really showed everyone was the Pietà. When he unveiled it, a crowd gathered around it, according to the 16th century art historian, and people had no idea who made it. They thought God himself had carved it out of marble because it was so perfect. I mean, the folds, the fabric, the emotion, everything about it. And no one knew who done it. That night, Michelangelo comes in and he carves his name into the sash, Michelangelo. And from that moment forward, he didn't have to sign anything ever again because if it was that good, it was obviously him. He's that much better than everyone. Some conflicting views on that, but anyway. That wasn't near his masterpiece. What he was gonna make here, I mean, the Moses, it's like next level awesome. Legend has, again, according to the 16th century art historian George Vasari, that when he he finished carving the Moses, he took his hammer, lightly tapped it on the knee, and commanded it to speak. Speak now, Moses. Because it was so lifelike, perfectly lifelike. Because when you look at it, you can actually see the blood coursing through the veins of this sculpture. I mean, it's insane, and he totally went to town on it. I mean, he went nutty with it. Moses has this giant long beard, and he puts his hand in the hair of the beard, draped in these robes and the fabric-y, and I mean, you forget that it's carved out of marble with a chisel and a hammer and a little bits of sandpaper, and it's polished and literally magnificent. Magnificent. To think that a person carved that out of a rock. The coolest thing about it are the horns. Horns on the Moses. You see, St. Jerome, when he translated from Hebrew to Latin, made a little mistake. The moment in Moses' life that Michelangelo is depicting is described in Exodus 34:29. And when Moses came down from the Mount Sinai, he held 2 tablets of the testimony, and he knew not his face was horned from the conversation of the Lord. And Aaron and the children of Israel, seeing the face of Moses horned, were afraid to come near. Horn. See, he translated the Hebrew word kern, which means power radiating from your head. And St. Jerome thought power radiating from your head was horns. So he wrote the Latin word for horn. Now later, when John Wycliffe and Gutenberg and all the other people started retranslating it, they changed it to light, or God's divine light. And that translation had been what people knew for the previous 100 or so years. So it was a known thing in Michelangelo's time that Moses didn't have horns, but he put them there anyway. See, he didn't like the Pope. So the Pope hears about this. Actually, the Pope had died by that point, but the Pope's ancestry, progeny, heard about this. They rushed into his workshop and they said, "Idiot, Moses doesn't have horns. It's the light radiating from his face." Michelangelo looks at him and he goes, well, now he has horns. And now he has horns. And for the next 430 plus years, he was right. Now he has horns. You see, they went to the Pope and they were like, make him take the horns off. That's not cool, bro. You gotta take the horns off. And he's like, I'm not taking the horns off. The horns stay. It's the original Latin translation from Hebrew. It has been the literal translation for the last 1,000 years. I don't have to take the horns off. It's in the Bible. And the Catholic Church was going through this whole Reformation thing with Martin Luther, and so they couldn't really say, no, you have to reinterpret it as blah, 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 because they were kind of telling everybody else, you can't reinterpret things, we're the only ones interpreting it, we're the ones with the power. So there's this whole like power structure dynamic thing happening politically with these horns as well. But mostly it's just a giant middle finger to the church. And as such, the Catholic Church would rather just kind of ignore it. I mean, they took the Pieta out of its tomb and put it in the Vatican. So you walk into the Vatican, there on the right hand side, you've got Michelangelo's masterpiece, the Pieta. But the Moses, which is a far larger, far more intricate, far more epic, he himself called it his most important work. That's in the St. Peter de Vancoli de where? Basilica de St. Peter de who what? They couldn't destroy it, but they couldn't hide it either. So in this little chapel in Rome, you'll see one of the greatest masterpieces of all time. You don't have to buy a ticket, there's never a line. It's like a secret little awesomeness in Rome. A lot of scholars say it was just a mistranslation, but I say he did it intentionally. I mean, just think about it for a second. He could have taken any moment of the Bible, any moment, but he chose that little tiny paragraph where there was like this weirdness. I imagine he was like reading the Bible, right? And he comes across the page and he's just like, horns? Moses had horns? That's perfect. That is perfect. I'm gonna chisel him with his robes and this beautiful beard, and it's gonna look so epic that no one's gonna be able to ever say that it isn't the greatest piece of work I've ever done, and I'm gonna put 2 horns on the top of it in your face. Of course, it is just art. Our interpretations of art is extremely subjective, and I might just be kind of imprinting my own shit on that. But anyway, it doesn't cost anything to see, and definitely worth a look if you're ever in Rome. I love you, my little lemon drops. I hope you enjoyed this history lesson, and I can't wait to see you, perhaps the day after tomorrow, when we continue our very important work.